Charles Key, you are a former Oklahoma state representative for the Republican side. What was that like? So, how long did you do it? When did you start? What was it like?
I served for 18 years, but two different tenures. I first ran in 84 and lost like a lot of people do, and then ran again in 86 and served for 12 straight years. And I was a Republican, and the Democrats here in Oklahoma have been in the majority forever. And so it was this big, strong Democrat majority in our House and Senate. It's now flip-flopped to be about just the opposite, which is about two-thirds to one-third, or even higher now for the Republicans. But it was that way for Democrats when I first went in. And I served for 12 years and just kind of finished that thought. In 1995, the bombing occurred. I got real involved in that. Some people might remember this state representative that, questioned the government, et cetera, et cetera. And that became a really big deal. And we ended up writing a 555-page report, literally the size of the telephone book. And then the powers that be came after me at that time, and they didn't get me in the first election that they came after me, but they really ganged up on me with the media and all kinds of other sources and barely knocked me out in that subsequent election. Anyway, so I came back in 2006. The Republicans had become the majority. There was a person running in my district that was a quote Rhino Republican. So I had a lot of actual conservative serving legislators that called me up and said, "Hey, Key, you got to run. We don't want another Rhino up here. We got enough already." And I said, so based on being in the majority, I thought, well, at least I could maybe get some stuff done that I couldn't do before. So on that basis, I ran again. And again, kind of coming back to this issue that we're talking about today, I knew because of my first experience that some things would never change, probably. And that is about the way the rules are run and the behind the scenes real workings of a legislative body. And that's what this book is all about.
Now, the book is called Stolen Government. Why your representative cannot represent you and how to reclaim your voice. I appreciate that.
No, there's a
That it,
couple.
I, I don't feel very represented. I don't feel very represented by my government, Charles. And I'm just while I when I looked at your info here, you talk about a lot about truth and how it's not really conducive to politics. Truth and politics do not go hand in hand, although I think that it needs to, because I think if politicians came out and told their constituents exactly, honesty, if they used honesty, like for instance, the things that are going on with Russia and Ukraine right now. In my opinion, if my government was to come to me and say, "This is why we need to fund this," and it's not for this country over here, it's for the United States' personal interests. I think if they came at us like that, we'd be more willing to fund it, but not
Absolutely.
while we're we're suffering here at home. You see the hurricane damage that just came in just this week. I I saw some headlines that said FEMA said they're running out of money. And how does that happen? How does that happen? But the Ukraine war is fully funded. What do you
Lack of
think?
lack of oversight. And I mean, ultimately it's lack of oversight by we the people. I mean, that's really what it gets down to. Because we could correct it. There's never going to be a time when government won't be like it is. It's nature. It's kind of like that story of a scorpion or a snake, floating across the river and I won't bite you. And that, it's the nature of government. George Washington told us that. And so and people don't like it. And frankly, I think to some degree, the general public's been indoctrinated not to like and not to get involved in this stuff, like economics and other things, because uh, yeah, some, not all. I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not a huge giant conspiracy theorist that everything is a conspiracy. But there are people that want to take advantage of opportunities and situations to as much as they can. And they're called in politics, they're generally called lobbyists.
Yeah. Yeah. I just
And
was just talking to a guy the other day about lobbyists and how they've kind of ruined things because it's kind of turned the United States into an oligarchy, if you will. You know, the most powerful people in the country have these people that work for them, and they pay them absurd amounts of money, and they live in Washington, and they go and lobby. And what that means is they go and they talk to lawmakers and they make deals with them. And then this lawmaker over here is got a lot of power. And so this lawmaker here says, okay, what we're going to do is you're going to vote this way. And if you don't, then we're just going to kill your career. Is that what you see happening a lot?
you described it perfectly. There might be some exceptions to that where there's little differences, nuances to what's going on in regards to at the moment. But that's exactly what happens. And I kind of divide this up. You know, I like to simplify or crystallize something first or get the essence of it and then drill down into the details. That's just my personality. And so what I've observed in, about 40 years of being involved in politics, most of my adult life, even when I wasn't in office, and still today, I'm very, very involved in what's going on in Oklahoma and elsewhere. But I see about a third and a third and a third, roughly. People go up there with the right attitude, the right reasons, and they go up there to actually do the job the way it's supposed to be done, represent their people, honor their oath to the Constitution, protect people's liberties, et cetera, et cetera. That those basic, a lot of times we call it American ideals. And but then there's a group that goes up there that's intentionally looking out for how they can feather their own nest and variations on that theme. And they're not all Democrats. I mean, when you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat, they're not all Republicans. There's both. And then you have those that are kind of in the middle. They're probably still, I mean, you'd still say they're wanting to do the right thing or they would do the right thing, but they don't want to fight the fight. And you get up there, or maybe you might be one of the lucky ones that knows ahead of time in the minority that here's the way it's really going to be when you get up there. And so when you get there, it becomes clear, either because you're directly told or indirectly, that you get in line with leadership, or as you just mentioned, your career will never get started, or you'll be a backbencher and never get anything done. And the book talks about that. It has real legislators talking about their experiences.
So what prompted you to start writing the book? Did you start the book during your career, or did you wait until after you were um, done with your representative career?
No, that's actually the best question because as I've kind of described everything, I show up in 86, actually 87, as a freshman legislator. I think the numbers were roughly 30 to 70, Republicans to Democrats, close to that. And it fluctuated a little bit over the years. And so I had a bill, I filed some bills, and I don't even remember which one this was now, but one of my bills was not assigned to an agenda for the committee it was assigned to. And so I went to the committee chairman. I said, "Hey, I'd like to have this bill heard. Are you going to put it on the agenda?" And he said, "No, just not going to do it." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he had some reason. And we discussed that. And I thought, wait a minute. That was one thing I was not prepared for. I was really very informed about history and politics, stuff like that. And even as a young adult, had prepared myself, reading a lot of material, preparing, which actually prepared me for that. So I knew, but this one I wasn't ready for because it's about the rules. I'll finish that point, but the legislature has a set of rules. People have heard of them, Robert's rules, Mason's rules. Usually it's a combination of those things that develop over time, and a legislative body will continually use those. So most people aren't really up to speed on that. They know there's some kind of rules and system in place. And then you get up there and you find out that in most states like ours, a committee chairman or a floor leader or a speaker or a speaker pro tem, the equivalents on the Senate side, can just say, nope, not going to hear your bill. And as I thought about that, I thought, wait a minute. Here in Oklahoma, we've got 101 House members. Today, it's about 38,000 per House district. We monitor that, and we all in each district, 101, send somebody up there, and then some guy that may get a title given to him, however that works, called chairman. He says to somebody else, duly elected by the approximate same number of people, no, you, but he's really saying your constituents aren't going to have a voice, or they're going to have a limited voice that we mute it occasionally. We monitor it. And I thought, wait a minute, isn't that a violation of the First Amendment free speech?
Well, yeah, and it's all also all being controlled by unelected officials.
Yeah.
Like the people that are lifers, like the people that go in to a certain security, they got certain security clearances, but I mean, they're lifers. They're going to be in the government forever until they reach their 70s, 80s sometimes.
Mhm.
And it's like the whole system's rigged against us. And it's, man, Charles, one of the things that pisses me off about politics is, when they go sign these bills and they don't itemize each issue like they should. They've got, a stack of paperwork this thick and it's stuffed full of pork. And if you've gone through negotiations, you know that one side goes really high, the other side goes really low, and they meet in the middle. It's like that in politics. Like they're playing with our lives at this point, and they stuff these bills full of pork, and they have salacious bullshit in these bills, and then they have stuff that they actually want to get passed, and then they fight over these things. They argue over the not so important things, and then the really salacious bullshit, and then it comes down to, well, we're either going to pass this bill or the government shuts down. But the name of this bill has very little to do with with what's in the bill. And like I can't remember what it was called, but there was a bill a while back. It was an infrastructure bill. I remember that. It was the infrastructure bill that Biden signed. It had a shit ton of pork in it. It was nothing but pork. And then just a little sliver is what we got for national infrastructure.
Yep. It's
And
it's it's so outrageous.
meanwhile, I'm being told to buy an electric car and turn my air conditioner off.
Yeah.
It's gross, and that's one of the things that pisses me off all the time. Is the government shutdown thing that's
Well,
coming up soon. It's what are we going to do? Like, I do understand. Like, yeah, we should shut the government down for this. Like, it's that important. I get that, but I'm beyond amazed by the bullshit that people are allowed to say and do just because they're a politician. And I won't cut you any slack on that either. I'm sure you've had your fair share of not so flattering times in your career. Like the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. We were discussing that very briefly. I was 10 years old when that happened, 9 or 10. I was born in 1985. And so you've been doing this pretty much my whole life. And so there's bound to be some not so good times in there. You know what I mean? But the stuff that people come out and say on television, you can fact check that right away and find out that it's complete bullshit. But these people will lie to us every day and still keep their jobs. I don't understand that, because if I was to do that, I would get fired. And you were a state representative in Oklahoma. If you didn't keep your promise to the people that you represented, you lost your job. What about the president of the United States? What happens when he doesn't keep his word? And that leads me to your book. Your book is you talk a little bit about that truth in there, the truth in politics and speaking truth to power. Can you speak a little bit what made you want to write the book, to tell people about the bullshit that goes on in politics and what makes our government, like, how did how is our government a stolen government?
Well, you did a great job of laying some things out, and here we are in 2024, however many years down the road that is, and we've not overseen our government for such a long time. It is, one can easily argue we've lost it already. Now, I don't happen to believe that. I think we're in a big window. Nobody can really put starts and finish times on that window like that. But I really believe we're in a window where we have an opportunity to turn it around, but it's moving in a direction where it's going to be completely not anything like what it started out to be. And the cost to get it back there is, like a lot of talk has been in these recent times, that the cost will be tremendous. So the point is that it's always been bad. Here's an example, like back to this question. Recently, in the last 2 years, and this year in particular, here in Oklahoma, there was a particular bill called Patients' Bill of Rights. It was a result of people dying during the course of COVID and other things not related to COVID, actually not related to COVID. It just happens to be in the same time. And so loved ones had their spouse, parent, what have you, pass away and have bad experiences, hospitals, like many people have all over the country. And so they requested this bill. Well, the guy that took my place started that process. He happens to be the floor leader in the House, so he was particularly able to get that accomplished, and he got it passed through the House. It went over to the Senate, and then it ran into problems with the whole the whole focus of what this bill is about. Because who's really running things? We should use a different word. Who's really behind those who run things are the special interest groups and the donors, which are special interest groups and large money donors.
And now this is something
So,
completely different than the deep state.
well, and it relates, and I'm going to get into all of that because it all connects. So what happened here just earlier this year, they got the bill passed out of the Senate committee. Now it's supposed to go to the Senate floor, and it couldn't get out there. And the reason is because the special interest groups, the hospital association in particular, didn't want it heard. And here's how we know that. We've known stuff like this and have stories, but these legislators are starting to say openly, in a more of a public way, things like this. Because this one senator that was carrying the bill said to a group of people, including these constituents that had lost loved ones and others, well, this is not going to get heard because the hospital association doesn't want it heard. So it's not going to get heard. Well, that's the way it really works. The money behind the elected officials that have sold out to some level or not, they're doing what the special interests do because they give them all of that money in their campaign accounts. And they don't just have campaign accounts, they have many of them, especially when you get in leadership, they have these other accounts they set up. And they've got a lot of money that floats around in there, and then they can give it out to other legislators to buy their support to vote for me for speaker or something like that. So, what I found out was this practice could happen. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. This is just a total violation of the things that we hold dear and talk about all the time. Free speech and redress. How can you redress government if somebody won't let you, won't let you act? So that started me on this, and I started finding, discovering, how does this work? What are the rules? I never really thought about the rules. The rules are a separate set of, quote, rules. They're not really law that legislative bodies operate on. Well, let me hit a couple of highlights on the way the system works so your listeners and viewers can understand this. We vote every 2 years in an election, and among other things, voting for people in those elections, what's being done is a legislative body is being created technically every 2 years. It doesn't have a perpetual life, technically speaking. It dies every 2 years. That's why House members are 2-year lifespan. And then when we have an election, that new, and a lot of them are the same people, of course, go in their first day of session, they're a new creature. They have to acquire rules. So they do it by just taking the rules from the past legislature and go on down the road. But on that first day, when they have to acquire rules so that they can function properly, they usually will not take up amendments to the rules or other questions because leadership, what we refer to as deep state by other names, doesn't want those members to get into the rules, because there's always people that want to change the rules, like I'm trying to do, and other things. A lot of it's because many members are disgruntled because of the discrimination that takes place over time. And so they're ready for that day when they can address the rules. So usually leadership will use a heavy hand and try to stop any amendments or anything like that. Well, what happened was we eventually were able to have this issue heard in my second tenure when the Republicans were in office. And there's a lot of good story and detailed stuff to talk about there. But if I could say one more thing,
Oh, absolutely.
when I when I started fighting this issue, before I ever wrote a book or anything like that, I never intended to do that, and that was a long time ago. I started then trying to get publicity in the newspapers, and eventually did get publicity, and it was good press. And on this book, when you see the top of it, there's a little subtitle at the top here. It says "Too Few in Control of Too Much" by the Tulsa World. That was a headline that a guy wrote after I'd been, you know, hitting this thing for 2 or 3 years. And it was an extensive article. It was an excellent article and an excellent headline, because that's
Excellent
really
headline, because I say that all the time. There's too many chiefs, not enough Indians, and it's kind of skewed from the way the headline put it. There's too few in charge of the many, and it's kind of getting to the point where we have uh, not enough chiefs that are willing to go against what we call the quote unquote deep state. And I 100% believe in the deep state. And I don't, I don't know how to explain it. I do think the deep state is actually a good thing in some certain circumstances, because like right now, who's running the government? The deep state is, and we're doing okay. We're not doing the best we could, but it certainly could be worse. That's just my opinion on things. Like I really honestly don't know who's running the government right now. And that's this administration's problem, that I don't know who's running the government. That's just me being honest. And that's we cannot be honest anymore.
Yep.
And I wanted to ask, we were talking about history briefly. Do you think that World War II and the subsequent Cold War and the secrecy that goes along with, do you think that has anything to do with the way the government is ran today? The consequences of all that secrecy coming to a head now?
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, that's why we have such huge deficits and so much money just where who knows where it's gone, whose accounts it's gone into, and why people, the elected officials that they send, especially up to the federal level, it's like they're not listening or they don't care. Well, the good ones get up there and they find out they're trapped in this situation. There's a real excellent video by Congressman Mike Bost from Illinois when he was in the Illinois House as a House member. And you got to look it up. I wish I would have sent it to you, and I can do that, and you could play it if you want to. But here's a guy, picture somebody on a floor of a House of Representatives, and he gets up and he's losing his mind. He's freaking out. I mean, big time. And he goes, "We come up here every year and we have these rules." He goes on for like 3 or 4 minutes. "We have these rules that stop us and hold us back from representing our constituents. And I'm sick and tired of it." And he throws a few cuss words out and he says, "I was sent up here to represent my district and I can't do it. How can I do it? And you guys," and he stands up and starts throwing paper and bills around, "and I'm sick of this." I mean, he's losing his mind. It really is a great demonstration of the frustration and the way things are up there, because here we are again, Oklahoma, 101 members. You send 101 up there, and some handful, without even proper explanation, are telling you what you can and can't say and do. Well, who's
Yeah, one of
behind?
my favorite guys right now is Tim Burchett.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why, so he walks that line. It just that's a very fine line you got to walk. And are you familiar with the UAP issues?
Oh yeah, very much.
So I'm a UFO nut. As you can see that alien behind me. I'm very much into the subject. I love it. It's more of an entertainment thing for me, but I'm very into it. So I see all this stuff on the news, and Tim Burchett comes out and he says, "Well, we want information. We're looking for information, but we've been told no by the intelligence community, not not anybody official. Unelected officials are telling him no, and that's it's you're not supposed to tell Congress no." And it's like I want to know so bad. That's one of those things that I pay attention to, but it's like that with everything, with literally everything. If they don't want this issue to be talked about, it'll get snuffed out in the news. It'll get snuffed. Like I use a one of the reasons why I started this podcast was because here in my local city, none of the news gets out. FBI investigated our school district, and it was a big, huge ordeal, millions of dollars gone. We live in the state of Missouri, and it was a big deal here. But like 2 states away, they would have never known. And it's because news doesn't leave here. It's like this giant hole. We're close enough to Kansas City that Kansas City's news overshadows ours. But also, when something big happens, it gets lost in the news. And then yeah, it's just a big old mess. But that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. And it just drives me nuts that we are not allowed to talk about what we want to talk about. Like even on this platform right here, if I was to say certain things, like my video would get taken down, my video would get demonetized. And that is not, that's just skirting around the First Amendment to me. I'm like one of those First Amendment absolutists. I should be able to say whatever the fuck I want to, you know?
Mhm.
And that is the frustration of the American people. We are all, like you were mentioning about the frustration that that man showed on the floor, on the House floor. That's how we feel every damn day. Every day when I look at the news headlines, and I shit you not, Charles. I yesterday I was watching News Nation, and there was a good segment came on, and it was about fracking and politics, and it was a pretty decent segment. And then I switched to CNN. They were talking to a Republican. Uh, uh, I can't remember who it was, but he was dressed in blackface in 2006, and somebody got a picture of it. And that's what CNN's talking about, as we've got people in South Carolina and Tennessee flooded out of their homes, just hurricane devastation all over Florida, Georgia. It it's insane. It is insane. And have you ever seen that movie, The Hunger Games?
Oh yeah.
That's what it reminds me of. That's
Mhm.
exactly what it reminds me of. Just a dog and pony shit show while the dumpster's on fire. And that I haven't had a chance to go pick up your book yet, but I, man, doing this job, I've got 3 books in line. So it's, uh, it's one of those things that I've got to take time out and really dissect things and read. But I'm very interested in your book because that one of the things that I talk about all the time is being able to say truth, being able to talk just like this, open dialogue. I have a feeling we actually probably agree on a lot of things, but there's probably some stuff that we don't agree on. And I am capable of discussing those things without getting personal, without
Mm.
calling you a dickhead, without you calling me an asshole. It's I have that capability. You have that capability. Now, what the hell is going on in politics today where we cannot talk about the issues? We have to attack each other personally. I don't agree with everything Donald Trump does, says, or advocates for, but his last term when he was president, I felt better. I had more money in my pocket. I had now whether it's a consequence of Trump's action or inaction, I don't know. I just know who was president at the time. My pockets were full. My refrigerator was full. I had gas in my car. I had work. Charles, that's a big thing. I had work. I don't have work now. I can't get side jobs. I can't get gig work right now. That's, I mean, you should be able to walk around your city where you live and find a construction site and be able to say, hey, I need 40 bucks, man. Can I just work for you for the day? That used to be a thing. You used to be able to do those things, but now it's just like, we're broke, man. We're sorry. Can't help you out. I go to the store and I feel it. It hurts, you know. Over the last 4 years, I have gone from $20,000 ahead in savings, and my savings is negative $8. My bills have never been higher. I spent $1,000 at the grocery store, and it only lasted 3 weeks. You know, granted, we do have four mouths to feed at the house, but that's what the American people are feeling. We're upset. We're pissed off. And you wrote this book kind of encapsulating the reasons why we feel the way we do. And that I'm very impressed that somebody had the balls to come out and do it. Somebody had the balls to say exactly what you're saying, Charles. And I can't thank you enough for that. But I do want to talk more about it. And without getting too much into the book, because like I said, I do want to read it and I do want people out there to read it. What is, do you see any, sometimes in the United States here, I see the ship righting itself. Do you see that?
I really do, but I wouldn't because of the times we live in and what we've observed so far in these last few years is insanity, and it keeps getting crazier. Going into places that people thought, oh, that never happened. You know, the conspiracy theorists are being vindicated right and left. But yeah,
Yes.
it looks that way. And if I had to predict, and I've been predicting in a circle of people that I run around with, I think they're not going to really try to steal this election. I might be wrong, because I think the wave is so huge that they know that it might be worse if they attempted that and tried to pull that off. The result of that might be worse than what will happen even if when Trump gets elected and Republicans take over. So
And that's
they're,
something I don't want to see either. I don't want to see Republicans taking over either. I don't, as far as politics go, I can't say that I lean one way or the other. I do have a mean libertarian streak in me. And right now, that's the right side. But just 20 years ago, it was flip flopped. So, you know, I'm more, I think I'm more in the middle, but I'm a conservative, just mainly because of where I grew up and my family. But I think I also think a lot of young people are coming out now, and that's making a hell of a difference. People like me now, I'm only 39, but I do have an opinion, and it's a very strong one. And it's not strong one way or the other. I'm just common sense, man. Common sense goes a long way, and so does truth. Truth goes beyond what we could ever think it would. If let's just say World War III, I firmly believe we're in the middle of World War III right now. And if politicians were honest, and if they come out and said, "Hey, we need money because we've got to go kick some ass," it'd be thrown at them. You know, they wouldn't have to beg for it. They wouldn't have to steal it. We would give it willingly. And that's what I was saying earlier. If the politicians could just be honest, and I think with the younger generations coming up, that's going to start changing. But not if they're being threatened with their jobs.
well, there's too
Not,
much money involved.
yeah.
That is one reason. This is one of my theories. Is one of the reasons we're in trouble is because there's so much more money involved in so many quote opportunities for people that want to go get that just for their own benefit instead of doing the job they're supposed to do when they go up there. So you've got all these people, lobbyists, you've got all kinds, including the elective side and the appointive side when somebody appoints someone. You know, if they're of that mindset, then they're probably going to appoint someone that's maybe going to get the job done, but they're also buddies, you know, or something. But you know, some of the things you were saying earlier about the problems that one of it, most of these things in my mind get down to are real simple. It's just in politics, people like to make it difficult, but it's a tactic of divide and conquer is one of those things that's going on. You keep people divided, and gosh, you know, it's frustrating for those of us that either have been for a long time or we've gotten into really observing what's really going on, like you're saying. You think more people would get some of these things, would understand this. You know, I grew up in, we were talking before we got started, I grew up in a Democratic household, et cetera, et cetera. But today I would say, now there was a time, JFK, RFK, and Tulsi Gabbard are good examples today. And is there any other examples of the Democratic Party? I can't find them. But my point being, the Republican Party is the only answer today, in my view. And I'm again, I got a lot of Republicans that hate my guts because of this and the things that I do. But the Republican Party is the only place for anybody to go, no matter what your age is, to try to hold on to those American ideals of individual sovereignty. I like to use the word sovereignty, which we don't use that anymore.
I
When you
love
read
that word.
you read the Declaration, the Constitution, and the historical documents of our past and what people said back then, we are the sovereigns. It's the only time this has happened. We got the power, baby. You know, like they say, we got the power, but we don't use it that much.
They
And we
stopped
don't, we,
being of the people a long time ago, didn't they, Charles?
yes, yes.
It's sick, kinda. You had mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. I'm actually a Tulsi Gabbard fan, although I wasn't at one point. I disagree with her isolationist policies, but I'm lockstep with pretty much everything else. She makes a lot of sense in a lot of areas, and I trust her word on foreign wars because she's a veteran. But I didn't always see eye to eye with Tulsi, especially when she was on Joe Rogan's podcast there a few times, and there was a lot of things that she said that I didn't agree with, mainly because isolationist. It's really isolationist. I'm not a globalist, but I do understand the need for global. Uh, I do understand the need for the uh, military industrial complex, and I'm also a fan of the military industrial complex. So it's not. We talk about conspiracies. I'm a fan of conspiracy theories. I'm a fan of the CIA, FBI because of the legend that they have. But did you see Tulsi Gabbard change her um, her policies or her politics, or did you see her party leave her?
I think her party left her. There's no question in my mind about that. The Democratic Party now, and there's no question in my mind. I didn't come to this conclusion recently. It's been several years ago, and before all this, actually, but this is all confirming it. They are dominated by Marxist Leninists. I just call them communists. You can call them any name you want, socialist, this, that,
Fucking
and the other.
commies, Charles. We're gonna be buddies, man. I hate them communists, man.
This is one thing I studied in my younger years and throughout my life. I've read a number of books by, you know, commies that came out of the Soviet Union or this, that, and the other, and how they function and operate. You know, the few things I remember from college when I did go is the history. In a political science classes, we also had studied the history of socialism in its very, very early days, way back in the 1800s, et cetera.
And it was bullshit back then.
Yeah, it's nothing new. You know, it's the same old hoodwink, pull the wool over their eyes, bullshit them, and you know, get your deal done and get yourself in here and keep yourself in by keep doing the same thing.
That's very interesting that you said that what you remember from your college days. Like you remembered the important parts, Charles. You remembered the history. And if we all know history, we can predict the future, in my opinion. It's it's repeating itself. I feel like we're living in uh, in between 1915 and 1950, all over again. Those areas in there in particular, like with the politics that are going on all over the world, you've seen a rise in anti-Semitism in the last 20 years. It's
Mhm.
it's wild. The Cold War, we were in a Cold War with Russia. Now we're in a Cold War with China. Like, and I don't even know if we're winning that one. So I'm just so frustrated by politics in general. But yeah, college, in my opinion, is a huge time suck. You don't really go there to learn. You go there to get that piece of paper that says, "Hey, I sat through all these classes, so give me a job." And and no offense to you, Charles, I'm just like a self-educated guy. I don't have any formal education past the eighth grade. So when I sit here and speak to guests such as yourself, I don't consider myself to be an educated person, but I consider myself to be a person. I am extremely average. I'm not smart, not dumb, but I'm average. And I can't speak for everybody out there. And that's why, part of the reason why I have this show is so I can learn, so I can speak to people like you and find out just what the hell is going on. And we've laid it out perfectly, for, the last 45 minutes or so, that it's nuanced and it needs to change. And how it's going to change is people like yourself writing books, telling stories, what is happening. I spoke with a guy the other day. I can't remember the name of the book. Let me see. Well, anyway, he's talking about oligarchies and how America has essentially been bought. Is that kind of somewhat of the premise of the book as well? Stolen government.
Oh yeah, because that's what it's happened. It's been bought. Yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you wanted to really crystallize it, is it power? Is it this or that? It's been bought. And so people that go up there, you've got the people with the money that are giving it to people that have the positions of authority to do or not do things. So here's an example. For example, let me say this. When I left in 98, it was because of the bombing. So I had been fighting this battle. It was probably my number one thing in the legislature, although there were several issues I fought that were more libertarian. And I was called libertarian by legislators. Oh, Key, we know what you are. You're a libertarian. Ha ha ha. We'd have fun with it. But so what I did is I started pushing this issue. I got press. And then after I left that first time and came back, there were activists that had slowly people understood this issue on the Republican side primarily, but even on the Democratic side, because it's the minorities, even within a majority, they're getting discriminated against. So it builds up this angst over time, and people are ready to fight. So what I did is that we wrote a little small booklet that was about 20 something pages long that activists wanted to use as a tool to recruit candidates for office and or go to people that were already there and say, hey, read this. We want this changed. Are you for it or against it? Start putting pressure on people. Well, then when I left after 2012, I wanted to expand on this book because I knew that every state was not like this. There's 30 states like ours, but there's 20 states where they require a bill to be heard or a disposition of some type. And so I wanted to research that. So I started to write this book, and I'm really trying to abbreviate this. And I wanted to expand even into the federal side of it because it's a really ugly story. And then also get into the money deeply because that really gets into drawing the picture of how bad off we are. But I didn't do those two things intentionally because once we got started and I was contacting and talking to state legislators around the country, I always realized that this issue on rules is something a lot like history is or politics to most people. Your eyes go glazed over and you don't hear anything. And I was really wanting to avoid that. So we decided that if I got into the federal side of it and the money side of it, requires such a deeper issue. The book would start looking like an academic piece instead of what I wanted it to be, which was a easy read for anybody to read it and come out of it real simply by saying, I get it. That's corrupt. We got to change that. And so here's the bottom line. See, when we, by not, by not having a rule like this, what happens? Well, what else has happened? We've been talking about it. Well, you're not getting votes on crucial issues so that you know if your House member or your Senate member is lying through their teeth or they're not doing what they said they were going to do.
Yeah, and then it just goes to the highest bidder.
And that's one crucial thing. See, people aren't getting a clear view. So your legislator goes up there and you, let's say, pick your favorite issue. I'm not saying it is, it's just that it's a big issue. It's abortion. Here in Oklahoma, most people are pro-life. I probably shouldn't use that issue. It's going to make somebody feel, let's
Oh
use
no,
something.
no. Hey Charles, this is why another reason why I started the podcast, sir. You speak your mind. This is
Well,
your time.
here's another issue, a real one in the legislature back when Obamacare passed. I was there. I'm in the insurance business, so I was one of the leads over in the House, kind of the primary one to lead the debate against it. So here's what happens: we had two bills that were going to nullify Obamacare and put it to a vote of the people. One of them only would nullify the individual mandate of Obamacare. The other one would be a total nullification, a state nullification, saying we're not doing any of this in the state of Oklahoma. Well, if people remember back then, the climate in the country was people were kind of like when the Clintons were in office and they were ready to get shovels and picks to go get them. Well, they were ticked off, and so there were bills being filed in a lot of states. Nothing ever got to where it was voted on, as I remember. But here, back to Oklahoma, our two bills passed out of the Judiciary Committee with big numbers. So now they're sitting there waiting to go to the House floor, and the powers that be, of course, are holding all this back, deciding with whoever they talk to and listen to behind the scenes. That's what's really going on. And so I'm asking, and other members are saying, hey, you guys going to release those bills? Release both of them. And we're trying to decide which one to release. We don't want to release both out there and let the people decide. And so they eventually let the light version go through. It passed. The people passed it in big numbers, like 2/3. And they thought they were nullifying all of Obamacare because most people didn't understand the full details of that. So my point here is this. I believe, for one thing, that was wrong. And that's a good example of how they play the game. They knew they couldn't hold them both back. They had to let something go through because the electorate was too focused on this. But what they did is they let the light version go through. If Oklahoma would have passed the full nullification, or any state, Texas, Missouri, anybody, then it would have helped other states do the same thing. And we could have, at the state level, turned this thing around. But I'll guarantee you, just on that issue and a lot of others, I could talk about another one about real ID
I
experience.
think I think actually abortion may have been actually a perfect one because Oklahoma is a pro-life state, but California is not.
Mhm.
So
You see, the
California is
double,
a pro-choice state. Like, wouldn't you say like, hey, I don't like this rule. I'm going to move to Oklahoma, or I don't like this rule. I'm going to move to California, and still have your federal protections. And that's I I do. Trump said something one time. It states' rights is very important for that very reason. So we don't have, like in California, there's a lot of people. I don't know how many people, but there's a lot more than Missouri. And it's so we don't have everybody in California making our rules in Missouri. And that's very important to me, particularly. Now, as far as pro-life and pro-choice goes, I'll tell you how I land on that. There's a couple comedians that say it real well. Joe Rogan, and this is where I heard it on Joe Rogan, but he pointed out that Bill Burr is another comedian. He says, like, okay, abortion. Let's admit that there are cases where abortion, is necessary. Oh, and like he's pro-choice and everything, but let's not ignore what it's still killing a baby. For real. It's still killing a baby. No matter how you feel about it, it's still killing a baby. We can have two things all at once. two ideas at the same time. Both things can be true. We can see the need for the abortion. We can still also say it's taking a life. It's killing a life. It's
Mhm.
both are true, you know. I it doesn't have to be black and white for me. I have that I've got moral flexibility where okay, it may be murder, but I'm not doing it. So those type of things, I don't necessarily feel like it should be, the pro-lifers saying, "Oh, you're killing the child, you're killing the babies, we're murdering it." Well, it's kind of it's a procedure. Yes, that's actually what's going on. Yes, that's actually what's happening, but I felt like I needed it. So, that's where my libertarian streak comes in. Like, I don't care what you do, just leave me alone. That's how I want to live. And back 30, 40 years ago, that was a democratic thing. Like Democrats said that kind of stuff. And now it's gone completely the opposite. So,
Well, and of course, our country was set up that way, really.
yeah, it,
We
it
didn't
really
have,
was. It absolutely was. During the Civil War, the Civil War was half the country against the other half. So it was very important that individual states' rights were upheld, but still have federal rules. The Department of Education. It's a perfect example of that right there. We don't need the Department of Education anymore. We used to. There was a point to the Department of Education years ago. Now, I live in Missouri. We have ADA compliant schools here. We have, um, like our schools have to follow IEPs and 504 plans. All that is set in place already. What the hell do we need federal intervention for?
we don't.
Exactly.
If it was back, it's all this is a reflection so much of the natural course that, and then people, humans in general, we could say, well, why haven't we fixed this along the way? Well, it's just because we haven't. We've actually, we've got lives to live.
Yeah.
And the people that are, it's easy and it is true, back to truth. Here's a part of the truth. We have sent people up there, they take an oath of office, the promise to do these things. They send out in their material, I'm going to do these things and I'm not going to do these other things. And then they don't do it. And most of us don't even know. We'll still go vote. Here's a little short story at my church many years ago. A lady that's the age of my parents. So I grew up at this church, and I still go there all my life. And so there's a lot of people there. There's a few left that are my parents' age. So this lady was one that would come to me when I was in the house from time to time, like a number, and they say, "Hey, who should I vote for here? Or what about this person or that person?" So we'd have these conversations. Well, it's the day after the election, a Wednesday after an election day. And we're at church on a Wednesday night. And she sees me, goes, "Oh, Charles," she goes, "Hey, it looks like a lot of our people won and we did real good here or there." She was talking kind of like that. And she said, "Oh, and this one guy, Jim Roth, who was a very public homosexual existing office holder in a downtown area, got reelected." And she brought that up and conservative and Republicans and Christians, were opposed to that. And I thought, well, before all this, I thought she's really kind of getting up to speed on stuff. She goes, "Oh, and Jim Roth got reelected. I was glad to see that." And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Were you for him?" She goes, "Well, yeah, why not?" And I said, "Well, did you know he's blah, 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 blah." And she goes, she's like she had a heart attack, this older lady. And she goes, "I didn't know that." And so anyway, I just use that as just simply, and it doesn't have anything to do with homosexuality or anything, just
Right.
simply how we are really uninformed.
Well,
And
it's kind of like what's being said about Trump right now. Like he's going to do this, he's going to do that, he's going to do this. He's a threat to democracy, and it's first of all, like we're not a democracy. So we could just get that out of the way. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. So
mhm.
um I, they say all these things about Trump, but there's no indication that he's actually going to do any of those things. I can judge Trump by his actions his last 4 years he was in office. And like that was only 4 years he was in office. So it's not, he's not a politician. He's, he's a weird guy, but all we have to judge is his actions. And pretty much a lot of things he did in office, a lot of good things, no, still nobody knows about. Like nobody knows about the trade deal he made with Canada with the drugs, and nobody talks about, like 2017, he started sending Javelin missiles to Ukraine, and Ukraine wouldn't have gotten as far as they've gotten without those Javelin missiles. And that nobody gives Trump any credit for that.
Mhm.
Nobody talks about the fact that Trump was making deals with President Vladimir Zelensky while Trump was in office. It's starting a little bit of talk about Trump's Israel policies are coming out now, but if I absolutely 100% believe if Trump was in office uh, during the last 4 years, we wouldn't even be having an issue with Iran. So, and right now it's really hot over there right now, and it could be pulling us into it. We've got F-22s in Israel. Like we don't take F-22s and just put them anywhere. And the fact that they're in Israel right now, that should scare a lot of people. But the only thing we can talk about is negative things about this person, negative thing about that person. Can we just talk about the positive things? Maybe they should start out the debates like that. Each candidate has to say something positive about the other.
Well, going back to our old, not going back to the subject, but using that as an example to where we're at, where this whole system we've got is out of control for the most part. And, people that get elected up there, I see a lot of over the years, and still yet now the Republicans have got like 80 out of 101. I told a member once, I said, well, so big deal. We got up to like 70. I said, so what, Mike? What difference does that make? What are you going to do then? You got all the votes you can do to have to do pass any kind of thing you want, override this, that, and the other. But the point is that some people go up there. So we'd have Republicans that would go up there and they would reveal themselves a lot. And a few on this issue, a very few would say, well, I can't wait till we take, I've got a story in the book, a lot of really good stories. A really good member from Tulsa that passed away a long time ago, good guy, a good conservative guy that thinks like I do. So I really like him. We were walking out of a committee along with a third individual. And back in the Democrat days, when they'd really stuck it to us, they wouldn't let us talk and treat you like redheaded stepchildren. Yeah, we were talking about, well, I think the last thing we talked about was the federal Department of Education. We were talking
Yeah.
about as an example, and how it's unconstitutional very clearly on the simple reading of the Constitution. If you wanted to fall for some of these arguments they use for different things related to this one's clearly not a federal government function. So, in any event, I think we were really talking about what do we
States'
need it
rights
for?
and
If
yeah,
they
and,
wanted,
and
if we wanted to appropriate money from the federal government to states for education, even though that's also unconstitutional, you could do that real simple by passing a bill and go, here you go, states, take the money, do good with it. But that goes to what the real question is, I think, which is it's about control more than it is anything else. It's not only that, and a lot of times people that don't want to believe, the conspiracies and the bad stuff going on behind the scenes, it has to be, you have to have the people that are driven by the philosophy and power and they want it and they want to control everything. And then those that are just really driven mainly by the money. They're like willing dupes together to bring about chaos on the rest of us. And that's really what's going on. You get enough people that are looking to just get the money. So they're willing to make compromises on maybe something they'd otherwise not do. But it's too much, it's money. I got to make a living, and it's a lot of money, probably a lot of times, et cetera, et cetera. And then you got people that they just know better than anyone else, and they know how the rest of us ought to live and what we should and shouldn't do.
yeah, I it reminds me of some questions people always ask, about foreign agents and why do people work X amount of years in the government and then turn coat and work for the enemy. And it's not that they're wanting to work for the enemy. It's that almighty dollar. It has nothing to do with enemies or friends or allies, and it's all about the money and power and control. And that's the long and short of it, because like it does take an egocentric person to even want to hold the highest offices in government, like the president of the United States. Like, how much power do they actually have? That's something that I ask myself all the time, because I run into, in my daily life, I run into a lot of people that don't know how to do their jobs. They really don't know how to do their jobs. I was speaking to somebody yesterday. I'd called and I had an issue, and their whole job is to fix issues. And when I had relayed my issue to this person, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to take the message and have somebody call you back. And so I asked him, what do you do personally? What do you do for a job? And so they told me I take the messages. And I said, well, so we could save a little bit of money and not pay you, and I could just go directly to the person that I need to talk to. That's the thing of it. Like, that's how the government spending has gotten out of control, because the giant bureaucratic mess. We need 5 people. We need 5 people to tell this one person that it's okay to do this one job. We could eliminate 4 people and just have those 2 people interacting between each other. And that says 9/11, perfect example. CIA and FBI had information that could help each other during 9/11. It could have prevented 9/11, but because they there was so much bureaucracy in between, FBI, CIA wasn't talking to each other, and then ultimately we had the attack on the World Trade Center. And I find stuff like that happens all the time. It's not necessarily there's ill intent there. It's just the bureaucratic mess that has become the government. Like, we can't move. We can't. The infrastructure bill, what we should have is just infrastructure in the infrastructure bill. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, the only way it's ever going to change again is back to we the people. Because look what the courts do when the things have been challenged like this. They'll usually say, "Hey, hands off because it's politics and that's the legislature's job." And actually they're most of the time, we're talking generically here, but most of the time they're right about that. And we really don't want someone that's like the big daddy that's going to come out, the man behind the curtains, whatever you want to characterize it like, and come out and go, okay, everybody, we're going to fix this thing and quit being a bunch of children or whatever, and then go on down the road and their life's okay. It's not ever going to happen like that. And that's why we're not seeing some people do things, is because it's more of a misunderstanding of that we have of the role of government than it is somebody not doing something. Now, on the other hand, look at a lot of the indictments they brought against Trump. And I'm not trying to be pro-Trump. I'm just talking about the lawfare now. You could
Yeah,
have,
because they did the same thing with Hunter Biden.
yeah, you could do, you could have some prosecutors in other states that could file charges just like they're doing against Trump. And I don't mean fake, I mean some real ones. But I think one of the reasons that hasn't been done by the other side, and this sounds like I'm patting us on the back, I'm not. I think one of the reasons is because they realize it's been escalated. And if you just keep escalating, something's going to blow up.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
actually the military's one of the things about the United States military is like in our doctrine, escalate to de-escalate. And
yeah.
when we're referring to government leaders and politicians here in the United States, we can't escalate to de-escalate.
Okay. Can I tell a couple of stories back to the stolen government, the rules?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Here's a couple of real legislator stories. And um, And back to, I want to emphasize to people that watch this. I know it's my book. I'm pushing this. Trust me, I don't need to sell a bunch of these books to make a living. I'm doing this because I'm behind it 1000%. And what people need to realize about this little issue is like a mustard seed compared to like how they use it in the Bible. I've never thought about that until just now as an analogy. It's such a big thing because if we create rules in the states where they don't have them and stop and prohibit this practice, it will be like a huge fix because then it defangs legislators from violating their power. It defangs them. They can't now say, no, you can't have your bill heard. And then parenthetically, not saying this because the hospital association doesn't want it, or the Oklahoma Bar Association, name your organization, or some big donor that's from the real super wealthy, companies or entities here in Oklahoma don't want it because they're behind me, giving me a lot of money, and or they're going to give me a job. They'll give me a good job to reward me when I get out of here. See,
Yeah,
you
there
won't
you go.
have
That's
you,
happening like crazy.
but we got to focus on that. It will largely, almost completely and effectively, it will eliminate that stuff. That means back to we the people get to decide and stop a lot of this monkey. The good
I
guys, the good guys that get elected to go up there, the good people, good guys and gals, there's always good ones, there's a lot of them. They can't fix it in the system because the system's against being fixed. It will not
yeah.
allow itself. So in Oklahoma, the other thing I want to say in the book, we don't just say, hey, here's this big problem and we're ticked off about it. We want to go kick somebody's ass or something. What we're saying is here's the ways to fix this. And we go through three different primary methods to fix it in your state. In Oklahoma, we're fortunate we've got the citizens petition initiative where you can get signatures on a ballot and then have it go before the people to let them say yay or nay. And
It's
we're
how
going
we
to,
got pot legalized here in Missouri.
well, and that's how it got legalized in Oklahoma too. And I'm all for it. I like that. There's people that are saying now, well, we got to change that because now they're doing this, that, and the other. I know there's potential problems, but I'm like Thomas Jefferson. I would rather have too much liberty than not enough than somebody. And here's one more thing I'll tell you. Think about how these people that are running for office right now, and it could be either side again, that people think, well, Trump's a Nazi and the Republicans, or the other side's a bunch of commies. Um,
Fascists. Man,
when,
I
well,
had
here's
that
the deal.
conversation with my wife the other day.
Here's the deal. If let's say Kamala gets elected, there's no question in my mind she's communist sympathizer, and whatever, all that kind of stuff. And it'll be a hell to live through to put up with what they give us. Well, I want legislators at the state level that haven't sold their souls or they haven't had the habit of giving in to pressure and going along with somebody from up above, maybe executive order saying, now you states do this now. And then they're just becoming enforcers and managers like they see themselves anyway. I want somebody that's got the guts to do the right thing and the ability to do it. And that's why another big reason we need to make this change.
So how do you think that works though? So you know just as well as anybody, if you stand up against, if you go against the grain, they're going to have it out for you. So how does that happen? How do we the people demand these politicians to represent us? And because like I started to say at the beginning of the conversation, I don't feel very represented. And that's the thing. Like representative of Missouri at the time would have been, when we legalized pot. We got the signatures to be on the ballot. They fought us. They sued us. They sued quite a few of the people that were trying to work in we the people's favor. And ultimately, it took 2, 3 years to get it done, but we got it legalized. And now the state itself is benefiting from the legalization. or decriminalization, however you want to look at it. Um, for me, I do want all that. I would vote for someone to come out and say, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to work for you. But then when they get into office, it becomes that song and dance. You do what we say, or you're not going to have a career. We're going to kill your career right here. And they start out like mayors and city officials and stuff like that. And then when those city officials go into the state, it 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 happens to them. And I don't know how to fix that.
Well, one thing I saw in my first tenure, going back quite a few years, I started seeing this trend of young people that typically they would, they're in college or maybe right out of college. A lot of them never go to college, which is okay. I didn't finish my college degree, and I think that's been a big benefit for me, frankly. But what I started seeing is a trend of these young people that were working for Congressman X or Senator X or working for the party or this political thing. Then they see and pursue working in the political realm as a career choice. And now, after as several decades have gone by, it's real common. Young people are coming out of college or getting into the workforce, and they are made me lose my train of thought for a second. They are seeing this as a career, and they've never gone out and really had to work hard, have to find out what life is really all about. I know how that sounds because I still think I'm like 18 years old in my mind, but I'm an old guy, so I know how it sounds like that. But the truth is, and this is so important, maybe more than any other field, these guys go up there and they're like that category of people I referred to. They're looking to feather their own nest, and they may be good libertarians or constitutionalists or or liberals if you're a liberal, whatever the case may be, but they don't have that experience. And that's really so valuable because what I tried to remember when I was down there pushing those buttons every time there's a vote is, what does this mean to me if I'm booted out of here right now after this vote? Am I going to want to live under this vote or not?
That's a
And
good way to look at it.
it's easy to be up there, and you're up there with the lobbyists. They're all out there waiting for you to walk out the door. They're everywhere, and other people that are trying to get you to do things for ulterior motives, other reasons. And so it's hard. It is hard. It's hard because you're hearing from those people all the time. You're hearing from special interest groups and not really the constituency itself. So here's a couple of things they like to do. I know in caucus meetings we had behind closed doors, when this issue would come up, and it often wouldn't come up like exactly like we're talking about it now, because I've written this book, I've come out and I'm talking about it. But I'm still in the legislature, and there's always members that are discriminated against because of the I'm going to say heavy-handedness. We usually use that to mean somebody's really currently actively doing something, but I just mean the overall having the weight on the scale that the speaker and chairman do. So this would come up in these closed door caucus meetings, just like the R's do, and the D's have their own stuff they do. And so we would be pissed off getting up. I'd get up, some others would get up and say, talking to the speaker or maybe the floor leader, whoever's running the meeting, but it's one of the leaders. And we'd go, hey, I'm getting tired of you guys do X, Y, and Z, and then you won't let us have our bills heard or this, that, and the other. So we get in these battles behind closed doors. One of their big arguments, the number one, is we can't hear all the bills because then we'll have too many bills to hear, which is a big crock of BS. But the second one is they'll say, and they've said it over and over again, you guys need us to say no to some of these bills, and there usually would be one that's being talked about. Like one we had that the Republicans didn't want to go on record for, some of them, the Democrats would bring an amendment or a bill to eliminate sales tax on groceries. And so we had members from districts that were kind of 50-50, and they didn't want to vote no on that because the reason they would justify it in that current climate was that we're already in a revenue shortfall. So if we cut this out, it's going to really affect our numbers, and we don't need to get down the road in this fiscal year and find out we got big problems. I mean, there's some legitimate thought process that goes on in that. But that's the argument. Well, look, you guys need us to not hear that. Then you don't have to cast a vote that goes on record that you voted against it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And that
so
goes to filling it full of pork and stuff like that. And that could, I,
they need to have the guts. Back to Harry Truman. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. You're there to make a tough decision. If your constituents want it, vote for it, or vice versa. They're the ones you have to go back and face up to.
and they're the ones reelecting or not reelecting you.
So sorry to, and here's one more. So when I was able to debate that on the House floor in 2011, the first Tuesday in February 2011, my amendment was one of the amendments, and it was a big deal. And so two members get up and argue against it. One of them gets up, and he's a good guy. You'd love to have him on your show if you were talking about some other stuff. You'd have a good time. He's a good old boy, good old Okie rural guy. He was heavy into agriculture, and he was a radio guy and stuff. Great guy. But his debate is still on our website. You can go look at it now. And here's what he said. I couldn't believe he said this because he said the same thing they tell us behind closed doors. He goes, well, you guys know we get up here and we got a bunch of constituents that want us to do different things. And, you will have a constituent come up to you and want you to pass some bill and say, hey, make this a bill and get this done. And you don't like the idea. You might even think it's a pretty stupid idea, but you go ahead and do it. Well, we need those committee chairmen we can go to and say, look, my constituent wanted this. I think it's not a very smart idea. I couldn't believe he was saying this on the floor. And he's still in office. He's saying this. And if you wouldn't hear it, Mr. Chairman, wink, 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 I'll just tell my constituent, you wouldn't hear it. I couldn't get it heard.
Oh
Blah,
my
blah, blah.
gosh.
And I was like, well, seriously, Don, you're saying this right in front of the whole
Yeah,
world.
saying the quiet part out loud. But at
Yeah.
least we get to hear that though. At least we get to see it because
Mhm.
he's not very smart about that.
And they're doing more and more of that where they're coming out and saying, well, they're telling people like this year and last year, we had people that really got up in arms because they were having an early vote for the next Speaker pro tem of the Senate, the next one down the road. So they have actually always cast those votes in secret. It's actually done in the Republican caucus. So technically it doesn't require it to be public right now, but people are so PO'd about it because they would call their senator up and they said, hey, we want you to vote for this one guy who they perceived to be the conservative candidate that needed to be the new speaker. And some of those senators said, hey, you don't realize how things work up here. You don't understand. Parenthetically say, don't call me and tell me how to vote. They might have said that. I don't know. But that's widely been disseminated now. Well, some of those people we just kicked out some people from office, some incumbents. There's like 7 of them so far. I've never seen this level of booting out incumbents in Oklahoma. So maybe that's a good trend for going on. But anyway, again, they're getting more talking down, more and more and more down to the constituent. Shut up, leave me alone. Don't tell
I,
me
I
what to
I
do.
feel every bit of that, Charles. I feel
Yeah.
every bit of it. They treat me like I'm stupid. They treat me like I'm a child that doesn't know what is good for me. They rules for thee, but not for me. That's how it is. Rules
Yep.
for thee, not for me. And it pisses me off so much. Like UFOs, man. I'm a big UFO guy. I want to know. I understand that there are certain things that we can't talk about due to national security. All
Mm-hmm.
right. But there's no reason why some things can't be talked about to, oh, I don't know, maybe spur innovation. You never know what it's going to do. You might spark an interest in a 5-year-old child to go to space one day or, you know, mine an asteroid, like things like that. You were talking about the um the bills and stuff, and like it's like the Project 2025. the there are some things in there that I do agree with. There are some things in there I don't agree with, and there's some things in there that I think is just terrible. But I noticed that once they couldn't the media in particular, once Trump wasn't biting on the Project 2025 thing, like they kind of shut up about it because people might start picking at things like that they do. And Project 2025 is not, it's one of those things that it's stuffed full of shit that they don't really want so that they can get the stuff that they want passed, you know. And I know Project 2025 isn't a bill, but it's something I could use as an example of no, like everybody can all agree that parts of Project 2025 are terrible. There are there are parts in it that are, it makes a lot of sense. We got a big giant government that needs to downsize now.
Well, and here's another thought. The bill, what they do is they won't hear. I mean, so the very first time I had a bill drafted was when the Democrats were in the majority. And one day after lunch break, there's a bunch of us walking in the door in the Capitol where we come in, and a group of three or four R's and three or four D's kind of coming in about the same time. We're all having a good time coming back from lunch, just talking, shooting the bull like guys do. And the two groups kind of merge together and stop and talk at one point before we go up into our offices in the chamber, and we're just kind of shooting the bull. And one of those guys is the chairman of the Rules Committee, a Democrat. And I said to him, I said, "Hey, Sid, by the way, you going to hear my bill or not on the rules?" He goes, he didn't know which one it was at the time. I said, he goes, "What is that?" I said, "That's the one on the rules." He goes, "Oh, that's the bill that's the bill that's gonna make us hear all the bills."
That's what
So
we want.
so you want me to hear the bill that's going to make us to hear all the bills? We all had a laugh about that. He had a laugh, they had a laugh, and I just laughed with him. And I said, "Yeah, I'm very serious." He goes, "Okay, well, we'll schedule it." So they scheduled it and heard it, and they had a good time with me, kind of, played around with me and asked quite tough questions like you would. And they voted it down. It went down party lines, so that's the way it works. It works fine like that. We don't do this in Oklahoma or these other states because we did it a different way and found out it doesn't work very good or there's some problems. That's not what happened at all. What happened is the evolution over time, the rules get massaged to give more power to the leadership. I've seen it in my short 30 years. I could give some examples of that. But if you look at the individual changes as you go along, you would be tempted to say, a lot of people would say, "Well, what's wrong with that rule? That probably is a good idea." Or they want it, they need it. So I don't see it's that big a deal. So do it. The accumulation of it over time pushes it heavily over that side to a few people making all the rules, making the
Well, you want to
decision.
know why? You want to know why it happens like that? So it's a fine balance, in my opinion. When there's a lot of rules, right? The more rules you have, the more rules you have to enforce. And that therein lies the problem. There are so many rules. Yeah, I mean, and then they need people to enforce those rules. And my I remember I remember my childhood. I had a lot of rules when I was a child, but I've got 10 times more rules now that I'm an adult. And free speech for me is a big one because I'm not allowed to. I was called a racist because I asked somebody. I talk about this on the podcast a lot, so I apologize to those of you that have heard it. But I was called a racist for asking somebody where they were from during an argument. I felt like there was a I felt like there was a communication issue. Like we weren't understanding each other because there was a language barrier. That's how I felt. And so I asked, like, "Where are you from?" They had a very thick Asian accent over the phone, and find out like 6 months later, this person is actually from Mexico. But I asked them where they were from. They hung up on me and, made a big issue out of it, made a report, this, that, and the other thing. And the results of that report were that I'm now a racist and I can't use this place anymore because I'm a racist. And I had no due process, no, none. It was this person's word against mine. But and it was very black and white what I said, "Where are you from?" And because there was a, it could have been racist. It was, they dismissed it. And I don't understand things like that when we can't say how we feel or can't ask honest questions without being attacked personally. I wasn't attacking this person personally. I was just trying to relay that I was having difficulty understanding them and I didn't feel like they understood me. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. It's just, what do you do? What do you do when it comes like that's where I see this ship righting itself is because people aren't as afraid to say things anymore. Um, if it came to me personally, if it came to speaking my mind or losing my job, I'm going to speak my mind because I don't want to work for a place that I can't speak my mind, which
Mhm.
is why I've been a stay-at-home dad for 10 years. But we've got you and I've got actually probably a lot in common. You're an Oklahoma boy and I'm a Missouri boy, and we're not too far apart. One thing, it's getting kind of late here, and I wanted to talk to you about Oklahoma. And I spent a lot of time in Oklahoma. Um, how far are you away from Ponca City?
Probably about an hour and 10 minutes.
Best damn steak I ever had in my life is in Ponca City. The Rusty Barrel Supper Club in Ponca City.
Is that right? Well, you know
Yes,
what? It just happens. I've been a Mexican food junkie most of my life. I've had to back
me
off
too.
just just because of age and stuff. But one of the best, I consider it the restaurant that I would want to go to is at the airport. It's called Enrique's, and I understand the people are originally Cuban,
Yeah.
and it's in the little Ponca City Airport. It's a really nice restaurant. Man, it is top notch. It is
Yeah.
good.
About 12 years ago, 12 years ago, about 12 years ago, I was doing a lot of work down there. Um, and the pipeliners were going through. And of course, most of the pipeliners that we had talked to were from Oklahoma. And so we'd walked up there and and of course, underground construction is what I was into. So I was a pretty dirty fella at the time, hairy. And uh, so we asked him, where's the best steak in Oklahoma? They said, right up the road, Ponca City, Rusty Barrel Supper Club. And we went to go to this place. It's like behind a mall, in a mall, like behind a mall. You go down this little hallway and it looks like an alley, and you knock on the door, like
Uh,
an old school speakeasy, and they slide open and the guy came out. He's very nice dressed, had a looked like a uh,
Maitre d.
tuxedo, yeah, maitre d outfit. And they told us like you have to have a coat and tie to come in here. And we were like, well, we're from out of town. We're working with the pipeliners. And they said they recommended you guys. They called the manager over. The manager comes over and greets us. And like we're jeans, t-shirt, looking like roughnecks, jeans, t-shirts. And the manager said, come on in, have a seat. They put us in a night, like it was candlelight restaurant type thing. And the two hairy big guys come walking in the door together. It's like date night or something. And they had a big old open pit in the middle of the floor. And I'd never had an aged steak before, but I had an aged ribeye. And again, this was like 12 years ago. Still to this day, the best damn steak I've ever had in my life. Best Chinese food I've ever had in my life came from Oklahoma too, but I can't remember the name of the place, the name of the city. You know where Ditch Witch's headquarters is?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
That
that
is,
city.
yeah, it's Perry.
Perry,
Perry.
Oklahoma. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
Perry, Oklahoma, Oklahoma City bombing too, they got like
yeah,
history there. That's where Timothy McVeigh was caught, right?
yep.
Yeah, I got some memories down there in Oklahoma, and I put in a lot of infrastructure down there.
Yeah, well, it's a good state. Matter of fact, talking about who we know and stuff like that, there's a conservative group down here that used to meet every Wednesday once a week. Now it's gone to every 2 weeks, but they bring in speakers, and I'm the one that made the contact with McCluskey, uh, and his wife Patty, Mark and Patty McCluskey, come down and speak to us. Took him to about 3 different places to speak at different groups. So everybody got a kick out of that. He's a good speaker, and he tells that story is kind of a fun story for a lot of people to listen to. So it was a big hit.
Yeah, I remember that was my first introduction to Oklahoma was the Oklahoma City bombing, and I remember I don't remember it like it was yesterday, but I remember seeing the building, the front of the building, and I I was like 9 or 10 years old when this happened, and I remember there's a daycare, and at my young age at that time, I knew how important that was and how upsetting that was.
Yeah.
A daycare was right in the front of the building, and it was, lost a lot of children,
Right.
and that whole thing, and that a lot of people also don't know that the Oklahoma City bombing came out of conspiracy. Um, in the wake of Waco, a lot of people don't know that, and that's a lot of some history there for you.
Yeah, I know that very well, and like we talked before, I'd be happy to come back if you ever want to talk about that story. And we produced a 555-page report that is the size of a phone book, literally, and has a bunch of color in it, has a bunch of experts. I think I'd probably send you a copy of it, if either an ebook or a hard copy of it, if you just send me the address
Well, I
where to
tell you
go.
what, how often are you near Kansas City?
Not that often, really. Occasionally I'll get up, travel this way or that way, but
Yeah, that's something I would love to do something like that. It'd be maybe a little rough to do it like this, but we could try.
well, I've done a lot of them. I mean, during the day, I was so sought after in that because it was such a big thing that I was the source along with some others. We were the source of the other side, so you had the government side and you had the other side. So it was constantly for about, I say constantly, it was regularly, frequently for about, um, 4 or 5 years. Real heavy for the first three, 2 to 3. And then as the trials took place and this, that, and the other, it continued. So I had a lot of, I did over 600 interviews like this one back. That's when radio was still around, radio
Yeah.
and blah, blah, blah. So we could talk about this for 3 hours.
Oh
Could
yeah.
cover all
I would
kinds of
love
it.
that. I would absolutely let's do it, man. Let's when we get off here, we'll plan something out. I've actually um my entire month of October is like booked. But I do have at the end of October, I've got some openings, and then after October, it's all wide open. I don't have anything in November, nothing in December. So um I am working on some stuff, but we're getting ready to redo the studio here. So that wall behind me is not permanent. It's actually on wheels. So we were renting this place for about 10 years, and we just bought it in January. And so I've come to the point where we started this in December, and in January we bought the house, and I was like, well, no, I've got the studio out there, and I thought about moving it to the backyard or buying a building. But I think what we're just going to do is we're just going to refinish where we are right here and just make it a permanent
Mhm.
thing. But yeah, I was asking how often you're near Kansas City because we're an hour north of Kansas City. And so we're almost local to you.
Well, I just went to the Republican convention, so we kind of went that up close that direction, so that would have been a great opportunity right there. But I don't have any.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. And absolutely, when we hop off here, we'll set something up for, next month or the month after or whatever. And I absolutely want to dig into that Oklahoma City bombing because I actually know more about Waco than I know about the Oklahoma City bombing, and I don't know much about Waco. So
Okay, well, this will be good.
I would love to dig into it because like you'd be educating me, and a lot of people that I talk to, I already know what I want to talk about when they come on. and I kind of steer the direction, steer the conversation that direction of things that I don't already know. So that would be a perfect conversation for me because I want to know, like I'm a very curious person. I want to know everything. So um yeah, that would be awesome. But Charles, it's been great. And one more time, what the name of your book?
It is Stolen Government. I left it in the other room.
Left it in the other room, but we'll
But
put a picture of it up here on the screen. Stolen Government, and it's by Charles Key. And you are again, for the record, you're a former Republican Oklahoma state representative.
yes,
And man, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you, Charles. We'll see you next time, buddy.
thank you. Appreciate it.